They came at dawn like a storm you expect but never prepare for. First came the boots, heavy, hollow thuds, down the lane, then the clamps of metal on doors, then the bright humming speakers on poles. Official and final, a voice spoke through them. Not a man's voice, a decree, cold, flat, and practiced. By order of the Astra Militarum, all able-bodied citizens are conscripted in the Emperor's name. My mother dropped the basin. Water and soap flew and cracked against the floor. She reached for me, but the sergeant's glove cut the space between us. His face was a dark shadow under the mask. I saw only the lenses, red, bright, impersonal, and I felt the simplest human thing boil into fear. I knew the look for what it was, an instrument. They cut our hair that afternoon, not gently. Razors scraped the skin down to the scalp as if they were removing names. They burned our clothes and handed us identical uniforms that smelled of smoke and oil. They tattooed a service number under my shoulder blade. I watched the needle bite and the black mark bloom like a small sun on my skin. The clerk said something about records. It might as well have been a prayer. On the transport, the hull vibrated like a throat humming a constant low note. No chairs, just benches and bodies packed shoulder to shoulder, until your breath mixed with your neighbor's. Someone started a hymn quietly. It broke like glass when the engines changed pitch. A man 2 seats down clutched a photograph so tight the paper creased white across his knuckles. He mouthed a name over and over until the engine noise swallowed him. They didn't tell us where we were going. That was on purpose. If you don't know the horizon, you don't have time to imagine coming home. They feed you slogans. Serve the Emperor, bring his light, defend humanity. But those words are thin against the smell that waits for you when the ramp drops. When the transport opened, the sky was wrong. It had the color of burned metal gray, varnished with smoke. The air came at us like a hand. It tasted like iron and old rain, like a wound someone else forgot to bandage. We stepped down into mud that sucked at our boots, warm as if the planet exhaled through the soil. Burned out vehicles lay like ribs along the road. The horizon was a jag of blackened steel. In the puddles, there were bodies, blank-faced, hands slack. A helmet with a smashed visor stared up at the sky like a dead moon. The sergeant didn't bother with speeches. He pointed and said, "Form ranks, move out." The words had no volume left. They were mechanical motions more than orders. In the moment between the pointing and our feet moving, I tasted how thin a life could be. I imagined slipping out between the lines and walking back toward my home. The thought lasted 1 heartbeat. Then a shell hit a ridge to our left, and the earth sang with glass and fire. They gave us lascans and flak vests that fit like promises the moment you realized their lies. The weapon felt heavy and foreign in my hands. A veteran, someone with eyes like hard stone, moved along the line, checking grips and ammunition. He didn't look at us the way you look at men. He looked at us like a man inspecting tools. That night, the first lesson came without words. We were given shovels, not for fortifications, for graves. The trench our squad dug was shallow and the soil came loose in my gloved hands, warm and wet. Each scoop pulled up the remains of someone who had been here before us. Shards of cloth, a boot, a name tag half melted. They told us the last unit had been wiped out in an ambush. They told us not to expect to find survivors. They told us to move faster because more men would come by morning. We worked until the moon. My hands were scraped, the skin under the glove raw and red. I tried not to think of my mother's face that morning, how she had reached and been stopped. Soldiers teach you a strange pattern. Keep the motion, block the thought. Repeat, dig, bury, cover. Repeat until your hands move without your heart. After we finished, a man from another squad crawled into our shallow grave and lay on his back as if testing the earth. He closed his eyes and said softly, "Looks warm enough." Half the men laughed, an ugly surprised sound that was almost a cry. The rest of us stood there, palms raw, and felt the truth settle in like dust. We were not chosen for glory. We were chosen to feed a war that never ends. If you ask what it feels like to be conscripted into the Imperial Guard, the simplest truth is this: the horizon dies before you do. Your life becomes a job the universe made for you, and the day they take you is the day the sky turns gray and never opens again. The first morning in camp, the horn tore the sky open before the sun did. It wasn't music, just a long metallic scream that seemed to drag the cold air through your ribs. We woke in our trenches, covered in a fine dust that stuck to sweat. Some men didn't move until a boot hit their side.
Form lines. The voice belonged to a drill sergeant who looked carved from iron. His bionic eye clicked as it adjusted focus. He didn't shout for effect. He shouted because silence made him nervous. The sound of his voice was order, and order was survival. They started with drills that weren't about fitness but obedience.
Stand, drop, crawl, fire, repeat. The commands came too fast for thought. You didn't learn to shoot first, you learned to not think. When someone hesitated, they didn't yell at him. They made the rest of us drop to the mud while the man watched. One recruit vomited halfway through push-ups. The sergeant didn't blink. "He'll either learn or be a fertilizer," he said, almost gently. The Laskan practice came next. We fired at targets that weren't targets, just outlines of men. The recoil was small, the hum high-pitched and sharp, like slicing air, but the smell burned ozone and metal that stayed in your lungs. When the weapon overheated, the casing stung your palms through the gloves. They told us not to flinch. One man did. The instructor walked over, took the lasgun, and pressed its hot barrel against the recruit's arm. The hiss was brief, human. "Now," the instructor said calmly, "you've learned what fear costs." We ate in silence that night. Rations came in metal tins, stamped with the aquila. The paste inside was brown, dry and tasteless. A veteran next to me whispered, "Don't complain. If you can taste, you're still alive." He smiled, not kindly, just out of habit. His teeth were broken and filed short. Then came the purification sessions. They called them that because indoctrination sounds too honest. A priest in robes that smelled of oil and incense walked between rows of recruits, his voice trembling with both faith and exhaustion. He spoke of the Emperor's light, of the duty we owed to those who could not fight. He said, "You will die, but your death will live longer than your name." Some men wept, others nodded. A few just stared, their eyes already gone blank, their minds folding in on themselves. At night, sleep came like a broken clock. You closed your eyes and saw home, but the noise, engines, orders, the sound of last fire drills kept echoing under the lids. I dreamed of my house, the cracked floorboards, my mother's hands. Then her voice changed into the sergeant's. I woke up sweating, my mouth full of dirt. The days started to blend. Time here doesn't move forward, it circles. You wake, obey, fire, eat, obey again. The rhythm becomes your cage. And slowly, something inside you changes. You stop missing your home because it hurts too much. You stop imagining survival because it feels like rebellion. You stop saying I. You start saying we. By the third week, one man broke. During inspection, he dropped his lasgun and shouted that he wanted to go home. The sergeant didn't raise his weapon. He just nodded to two commissars standing nearby. They walked the man behind the tents. A pulse of blue light cut the air. No one spoke after that. That night the sky opened again, but not with light. A bombardment far off lit the horizon orange and red, like a wound reopening. We were told it was the front line, that we'd march there soon. Some men prayed. Some drank from hidden flasks. I sat there, hands on my knees, staring at the mud drying on my boots. The sergeant said something earlier that day that wouldn't leave me. "Remember, guardsmen, you are not soldiers. You are the wall between the galaxy and the void. And walls do not think, they endure." When I finally lay down, I understood what he meant. Sleep didn't come easy anymore, because somewhere in my chest, I could feel the first cracks forming. We left camp before dawn. The air was thick with the stench of oil and cold smoke. Rows of us stood shoulder to shoulder, each clutching a lasgun that still smelled faintly of burnt metal. The ground trembled beneath the weight of transports revving up, metal beasts coughing clouds of black exhaust. No speeches, no blessings this time. The priest had lost his voice. The commissars didn't bother with words. They just watched us board, their hands resting near their holsters as if mercy itself had to be guarded. Inside the transport, the world shrank. It was dark, cramped, and hot. 50 of us packed so close that every breath belonged to someone else. The engine's roar filled the air, drowning thought. My helmet pressed into my forehead, sweat dripped into my eyes. Someone vomited near the back. No one turned to look. The stench mixed with the smell of grease and fear. Through the slit of a viewport, I saw the city pass. If you could still call it a city. The towers were bones, hollow, shattered, bent in half, rubble piled like broken teeth. Civilians stood in lines stretching for blocks, faces pale and blank. Some were missing limbs, others just stared, as if the light had already left them. Children waved as we passed, not because they were proud, because they were told to. "First war zone," a voice asked. The man across from me grinned through cracked lips. His armor was dented, scarred, and his right hand was missing 2 fingers. "Don't think," he said. "That's the trick. Don't think, just follow." I nodded, though I didn't understand. Not yet. When the transport stopped, the silence hit harder than the noise. The doors hissed open, spilling us into daylight. The sky was a bruised gray. The wind carried dust, and something thicker. The metallic tang of blood and ozone. It stuck to the back of your throat. Ahead of us lay the trenches, long, jagged scars across the earth, filled with smoke and movement. You could hear the war before you saw it, the hiss of loss fire, the thud of mortars, the mechanical roars of distant armor. Every sound felt too close, like the world itself was trying to swallow us. They herded us into formation again. Keep low, keep quiet, keep moving. It wasn't shouted, it was whispered, almost reverent. We passed the wounded on the way down, men missing arms, faces half burned. One still clutched a melted lasgun, his hand fused to the metal. Medics moved among them without speaking. There was no space for comfort here, only function. When I stepped into the trench, something inside me shifted. The walls were slick with mud and blood. The air was too thick to breathe, but worse was the sound. The low hum of men murmuring prayers, the rasp of metal boots, the mechanical rhythm of war that never stopped. I realized, standing there in that endless line of gray uniforms and haunted eyes, that the Emperor hadn't chosen us for our strength. He'd chosen us because we were expendable. As the first shell screamed overhead, the ground shook, dirt rained down like ash. The sergeant's voice came through the noise, steady and cold. "Welcome to the front, guardsmen." He paused. "Remember, walls don't break." And then the whistle blew. It began with the ground shaking, not from shells this time, but from something heavier, something alive. At first, the noise was just a distant vibration, a low, rhythmic pulse that you could feel in your ribs. Then came the screams. Not human, not even close. It was a chorus of rage and madness, echoing across the dead earth. The sergeant's voice cut through it, barking orders, but the sound was already swallowing everything. Positions. Eyes front. We crouched behind the trench wall, less guns trembling in our hands. Mud splattered our faces as the first barrage landed, shards of metal slicing through the air like wasps. The world turned to thunder. Each explosion shook my bones. I couldn't tell if I was screaming or just breathing too hard. Someone to my left took a hit. A flash of red. A hole where his face used to be. No time to react, another took his place, stepping over him without a word. That's how quick it happened. The war didn't pause for grief, it devoured it. The commissar walked the line like death itself. Calm, unflinching, black coat, unmoving in the storm. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His presence alone forced us upright. Then came the order. Return fire. The sky turned red. Thousands of lost bolts screamed forward, streaking light through the dust. I fired until my weapon burned my palms. Every flash lit the faces of men dying beside me. One moment alive, the next gone. The smell of ozone and blood fused together into something you couldn't wash off. And then I saw them. The enemy, through the haze, silhouettes charging through smoke too fast, too brutal to be men. Green flesh, crude armor, orcs. The ground shook harder now, each one a mountain of muscle and rage, roaring with laughter as our fire tore chunks out of them. But they didn't stop. They never stopped. The sergeant yelled, "Hold the line," but his voice broke halfway through. The trench walls splintered under the impact of their charge. One leapt in, cleaver raised, and I saw the man next to me split from shoulder to spine. His body didn't even hit the ground before another replaced him. I pulled the trigger until the last gun clicked empty. Then I grabbed another weapon. It didn't matter whose. Everything blurred. Mud, fire, metal, teeth. I remember one detail clearer than all the rest. The sound of an orc's laughter. It wasn't just noise. It was a joy. Pure, monstrous joy. We fought like cornered animals. Hours vanished into seconds. And then, just as quickly as it began, it ended. The orcs fell back. The ground was littered with corpses, green and human alike. The trench walls ran red. Smoke hung heavy and unmoving. I stared at my hands. They were trembling, raw, covered in blood that wasn't mine. The sergeant limped past, his voice barely above a whisper. "Congratulations, guardsman," he said. "You've survived your first hour." He looked out at the horizon, where the enemy was already regrouping. His tone was colder than the air. "You won't survive the second. The silence after combat is irreal. It hums like a wound that refuses to close. When the guns stop, your ears still ring. The echoes crawl through your skull long after the shooting ends. The smell of burnt ozone hangs in the air, mixed with copper and ash. You try to breathe, but every breath feels stolen. We were told to rest. No one did. Some stared blankly at the bodies laid in rows. Others picked through the wreckage, searching for parts, ammo, or something familiar to hold. I found a half-melted dog tag in the mud. No name left. Just a piece of metal that once meant someone existed. I kept it anyway. The Medicaid tents were full. Men screaming. Some with no legs. Some with no faces. Others, silent. Just staring, wide-eyed, as if they'd seen the warp itself. Maybe they had. The smell inside was unbearable. Disinfectant, blood, and fear. The medics moved like ghosts, efficient, emotionless. They had to be. You can't save everyone when everyone's dying. Outside, a priest was reciting prayers to the emperor. His voice cracked with every line. "Blessed be his light, eternal be his throne." He said it over and over, until the words stopped meaning anything. The commissar watched us from a distance, still, unmoving.
He didn't blink much. Maybe he didn't need to. His eyes felt like they were carved from stone. We all knew he was looking for the weak ones, the ones who might break. You learn fast, not to show fear.
In the guard, fear gets you killed faster than a bullet. One of the new recruits, a kid from Vostria, started crying quietly. He tried to hide it, but everyone heard. The commissar walked over, calm as always. No yelling, no drama, just one clean bolt round to the head. "Cowardice is contagion," he said. Then he wiped the blood off his glove and went back to watching the horizon. No one spoke after that. Night came fast. The sky turned black, but the ground stayed red. The fires still burned in the distance, painting everything in shades of orange and shadow. I sat against the trench wall, holding my Loscan close, not out of duty but comfort. The metal was warm, familiar, real. Sleep didn't come. When I closed my eyes, I saw faces. Some I knew, most I didn't. Mouths open, screaming. Eyes hollow. And every time I drifted near sleep I heard the laughter again, that orc's deep echoing roar. I woke up shaking. The horizon was still dark, but the air felt heavier. The ground trembled again, just slightly, and every soldier felt it at once. The sergeant moved down the line, whispering, "They're coming again." No one complained. No one ran. We just stood, weapons raised, waiting for the sun to rise and the world to end one more time. And in that stillness, in that strange, endless quiet, a truth settled into my chest, like a weight I'd never lift again. This wasn't a war. It was a cycle, and we were the fuel keeping it burning. The sirens began before dawn. That sound, sharp, metallic, and endless, cuts through sleep like a blade. No one spoke. No one had to. Every man just moved on instinct, hands shaking as we loaded cells into lascans, checked power packs and tightened straps already worn thin. The ground was still dark when the first shadows appeared on the horizon. Not orcs this time, something worse. Tall shapes, like moving fortresses. Armored walkers, kill cans maybe. Or something cobbled together from the wreckage of yesterday's slaughter. Each one belched smoke thick enough to choke the sun. "Positions," the sergeant yelled. His voice cracked, but it didn't matter. We were already in place. The first shells hit the far trench line. A wall of dirt and flesh lifted into the air. The sound hit a moment later, a deep body-shaking roar that made your bones rattle. My ears rang again, that constant hum that never goes away. I remember seeing the commissar standing tall on the ridge, cloak whipping in the wind, bolt pistol raised high, his voice carried somehow over the chaos. For the Emperor, we screamed it back, not because we believed but because silence meant death. The orcs charged again, howling. Their crude banners whipped above them, red and black, covered in blood and glyphs that made no sense. Their laughter rolled like thunder, the kind of laughter that didn't stop even when they were on fire. The world became noisy, gunfire, screaming, the tearing sound of flesh against metal. A man next to me, Mersk I think, took a shell to the chest, half of him gone, just gone. The heat from the blast was so close it burned my skin through the flak vest. I didn't even look at him. Couldn't. My lascan overheated twice. The third time I dropped it and grabbed another from a corpse. That's how it works. You don't fight for glory, you fight with whatever's left. A walker broke through the trench wall not 10 meters ahead. Massive claws dripping oil and blood. It tore 3 men apart before a lucky missile hit it from above. The explosion knocked me back. Everything went white. When I opened my eyes, it was over. Smoke, screams. Silence again. Bodies everywhere. Some are still twitching. The ground slick with blood and coolant. I found the commissar later, half buried under rubble. Still alive, one leg missing. He looked at me, face pale but calm. "Keep the line," he said. Then he raised his bolt pistol and shot himself. That was the moment something inside me broke. I stopped praying. Stopped thinking. Stopped caring about tomorrow. All that was left was the sound of the wind moving through the ruined trenches, carrying the faint smell of iron and smoke. And for the first time, I realized what the Imperial Guard really is. A machine that eats men, fueled by faith and fear.
And it never ever stops. They pulled us from the front after 12 days of fighting, or at least those of us who could still walk. We were told it was a temporary withdrawal, that we'd earned rest. But the way the officers avoided our eyes told a different story.
We were the ones who'd seen too much. The camp was called Station D-47, though it looked more like a scrapyard surrounded by barbed wire, rows of tattered tents, a few burned-out chimeras rusting in the mud, and the smell, gods, the smell. Old smoke, blood, disinfectant, a smell that clung to your skin. They took our weapons the moment we arrived. Then our armor. We were just bodies again, pale, shaking, filthy. The Medicae units moved like ghosts between us, faces hidden behind cracked rebreathers. No one talked. Even breathing felt too loud. That first night I lay in a cot under a torn tarp, staring at the flicker of a single lumen light above me. It buzzed with that faint electric hum, steady, hypnotic. For a moment I almost believed I was safe. Then the screaming started. It came from the far end of the camp, someone in the infirmary. It went on for a long time, high, raw, human. No one moved to help. We all just listened until it stopped. The next morning, they came for him with a sheet. That's when I noticed something. Every day, fewer men left the tents for roll call. The officers said they were being transferred for rehabilitation, but no transport ever arrived or left. At night, strange machines hummed beyond the medici tents, low, grinding, like bone being polished. Sometimes, the air smelled of burnt oil and something faintly sweet. One morning I saw a shape under one of the tarps near the edge of camp. It looked like a man, except metal gleamed through the skin at the joints, tubes threaded out from the neck, disappearing into the mud. I took one step closer, and it moved. Its head turned slightly, like it was listening. Then I realized it wasn't breathing. The sound I heard was mechanical, slow, deliberate, a pump forcing air where lungs used to be. Servitor draft, someone whispered behind me. I turned, but no one was there. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces I used to know. Mask, the commissar, the men who never came back from the trench, and now I wondered if they were here too. Not alive, not dead, just repurposed. By dawn I understood something awful. We weren't resting. We were waiting to be used again. Because in the Imperium, even broken soldiers have value. Flesh can be remade, faith can be reforged. And somewhere in the hum of the camp's machines, I thought I heard a voice, not human, not divine, whispering just below the noise. You will still serve. It began before dawn. A siren wailed once, low, hollow, like it came from the throat of something half asleep. Then silence again. The guards moved through the rows of tents, their boots crunching on frost-hardened mud. They weren't barking orders anymore, just calling names. Calm, measured. When they said mine, I froze. A man beside me, Corin, I think, grabbed my sleeve and whispered, "Don't go." But what choice did I have? You don't say no to an Imperial order, even when your gut knows it's the last one you'll ever receive. They lined a dozen of us outside the infirmary. The sky was still gray, that dead kind of light that hides the horizon. We could hear the hum of machinery inside. Hot air seeped through the flaps, smelling of oil, ozone and singed hair. When my turn came, they didn't blindfold me. Maybe they wanted me to see. The Medicaid chamber wasn't a hospital. It was a workshop. Tables lined with tools, saws, drills, syringes the size of my forearm, cables hung like vines, dripping condensation. And in the middle, on a raised slab of metal, was something that used to be a man. Half his skull was replaced by a dull metal plate. Where his eyes should have been were lenses, red, flickering, unfocused. He didn't move, but his fingers twitched, like they were trying to remember what hands were for. I couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. A tech priest shuffled forward. His voice was flat, mechanical, filtered through layers of static. Subject, infantry pattern, baseline, neural compliance acceptable, muscle degradation, within limits. He turned to me. His hood fell slightly, revealing a jaw made of steel. Step forward. I did. The slab was cold. The restraints locked before I even realized what was happening. Something hissed behind me. A needle finding skin. Then pain. Not the kind that burns or cuts. This was inside pain, like someone was rewriting the rules of what I was. I saw flashes of light, lines of binary, streams of scripture, mechanical prayers whispered directly into my skull, voices layered on top of each other. Serve the Omnissiah. Flesh is weak, purpose eternal. Somewhere in that storm of sound I screamed. Or maybe the machine did. I couldn't tell anymore. When I woke, my arms felt heavy. I tried to move. Nothing. My vision was wrong. The world looked too sharp, too distant. Something clinked when I breathed. Then I saw my reflection, a dull metal surface across the room. A lens where my eye should be. Cables snaking from my spine. Hands no longer flesh. I wasn't finished yet. Still half man, half machine. They were building me, around me, more tables, more bodies. Each one whispering, twitching, praying, and over it all, that same calm, holy voice of the tech priest. Another servant born of devotion, another soul freed from choice. Time stopped making sense after that. I don't know how many hours, days or weeks passed between the operations. Every time I woke up, something new was gone. A sensation, a thought, a word that no longer had meaning. The others were still there, around me. Men, women, some little more than torsos wired into frames. They whispered prayers, not with voices, but through static bursts that rattled the air. It wasn't language anymore, it was obedience given form. I tried to pray too, but the words fell apart before leaving my mouth. Every syllable sounded wrong. Hollow, like they were being translated through a broken machine. One day they turned the lights down and brought a new machine into the room. I felt it before I saw it. A vibration that trembled through the metal bed. The tech priest spoke in that same dry monotone. Integration complete. Final synchronization begins. Then came the pulse. It started at the base of my skull, a low hum that crawled through my spine and spread across my body. I felt every nerve twitch, every muscle tighten, until it wasn't mine anymore. The hum became a roar inside my head, and for a moment, I saw everything. The ship's corridors, the workers, the miles of cables running through the deck. I could feel the power conduits like veins, hear the heartbeat of the generatorium like a god whispering in my ear. Then it faded, and when it did, I realized I couldn't remember my name. It was right there, at the edge of my mind, but every time I reached for it, something else replaced it. Serial codes, commands, task protocols. Each time I resisted, the hum grew louder, punishing, cold, perfect. A voice inside me said, "Compliance is peace." And for a second, I believed it. I thought maybe this is what the Emperor wanted. A mind so pure, it no longer questioned. A body so loyal, it no longer ached. But then I remembered Corin. His face, his fear, his voice whispered, "Don't go." That memory burned like fire through the static. It wasn't supposed to be there. Emotion was a fault line. The hum turned into a scream. The world shook. The restraint sparked. And I realized something horrifying. The machine wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to erase me. Piece by piece, it was cleaning the human from the code, leaving only obedience behind. I fought. I tried to move, to scream, to be, but my voice came out as a burst of mechanical distortion. Somewhere, I heard the tech priest murmur, "Subject resisting conversion. Apply correction protocol." There was a flash of white, like the inside of lightning, and in that moment, I understood the truth. Death wasn't the end. This was worse. This was forever. When I woke up again, everything was silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that swallows thought itself. At first, I thought I was blind. There was only darkness, pure and endless. Then a light blinked. Faint, green, mechanical. My eyes adjusted slowly, but the world didn't look real anymore. It was all lines, grids, numbers, flickering at the edge of my vision. I tried to move my hand. Nothing. I tried again. Something else moved, heavy, metallic, deliberate. The sound echoed a low hiss of hydraulics. That's when it hit me. Those weren't my muscles. Those weren't my bones. Something had replaced them. A voice cut through the static in my mind. It wasn't external. It came from inside. Unit 731. Initialize. The words burned through my head like an order from a god. I didn't want to obey, but my body did. My limbs shifted, rising from the slab. The sound of metal grinding on metal filled the room. It was smooth, efficient, horrifyingly obedient. Each motion felt distant, like someone else was pulling invisible strings attached to me. I wanted to scream, to make any sound. But when I opened my mouth, only a burst of mechanical feedback came out, a stutter of broken noise. Speech function restricted, the voice again, calm, commanding. I couldn't fight it. I could barely think through the static now building behind my eyes. Then another command followed, soft, patient, final. Proceed to work Sector 9. I felt my body turn without permission. My steps were automatic, heavy. Each one shook the ground slightly. There was a rhythm to it, not human, not free, just function. As I moved, more details came into view, rows upon rows of others, bodies like mine, assembled in silence. Some are still half human, others fully converted. We walked in lines under red light, a synchronized tide of flesh and machine. They didn't look at me, I didn't look at them, because we weren't meant to see. We were meant to serve. Somewhere above us, the tech priests watched from glass chambers. Their robes shimmered with faint circuitry. Their faces, what was left of them, glowed faintly with augmetic eyes. They didn't speak, they didn't need to. We were perfection, broken humans, turned into silent obedience. But inside the hum of order, something cracked, a faint flicker, not in the circuits, but in me, a thought, small, fragile. Humans, this isn't me. The moment it formed, pain exploded behind my eyes. My vision fractured into static lines of white, green, red. The voice returned, colder now. Error detected. Emotional deviation. Apply neural correction. Then came the shock. Pure electricity. It didn't just burn. It was erased. And through it all, I could hear the same whisper repeating inside me, layered over itself, again and again. Compliance is peace. Compliance is peace. Compliance, until even the pain began to fade. At first I thought I was gone, deleted, wiped clean like a failed line of code, but something lingered. A sound, a pulse, like a heartbeat made of static. Then I began to see, not with eyes, those were long gone, but through data streams, flickering across endless darkness. Images flashed and vanished faster than thought, cities burning, banners of the Imperium waving above seas of bodies, a child holding a small metal toy shaped like a lasgun. That child, I knew him. The recognition hit like a falling star. His name clawed at the inside of my skull, but every time I tried to remember it dissolved into static. Still, the feeling remained. Warmth. Fear, a mother's voice calling him home through the dust. Was that me? The thought echoed, sharp and forbidden. Machines don't remember, they execute. And yet, there it was, a memory blooming like infection in a sterile system. The data around me twisted. My vision shifted from red mechanical light to something else entirely, a dreamscape of rust and bone, towers of flesh welded to steel, their faces whispering the same hymn. The Emperor protects, the Emperor commands, the Emperor consumes. Their mouths didn't move, the sound just existed, vibrating through every wire, every bolt of the machine that I had become part of. And somewhere deep in that choir of obedience, a human scream was buried beneath the harmony. I tried to follow it, to trace the echo back to wherever I still was. Each time I reached out, commands flooded my brain. Unit 731, cease deviation. Neural purge initializing. Thought detected. Thought equals sign error. I resisted, just for a second. It felt like trying to stop a planetary engine with your bare hands. Impossible, idiotic, but human. And then the dream began to change. I saw the battlefield again. Millions of guardsmen charging across grey mud. Lasfire lighting the fog. Their faces, terrified, defiant, mortal. Each one, believing they mattered. Then, above them, I saw us. Servitors. Silent ranks of metal and bone, filling trenches, repairing tanks, cleaning blood. Unthinking, unfeeling, disposable. That's when I understood the horror of it. I hadn't been saved for service. I'd been recycled, turned into a tool to keep the machine moving while the flesh rotted away. The Emperor didn't need my faith anymore. He needed my function, and somewhere, in that realization, a laugh rose out of me, crackling through damaged speakers, distorted and ugly, a broken fragment of something human, trying to find humor in hell. The laugh triggered alarms. My body convulsed, wires snapping under the weight of restraint. Then, silence again. The system froze me mid-movement. Containment breach. Neural corruption, 17. Subject 731, unstable. Voices overlapped, tech priests shouting data rights, servo skulls whirring overhead. I couldn't see them anymore, but I could feel their fear, because something they'd made to obey had started to remember, and somewhere deep in the static of my mind, that same child's voice whispered faint, defiant, impossible. You don't belong to them. There is a moment when something inside you breaks, not like a bone, not even like a machine's cog, but like the boundary between what you are and what you were never meant to be. That's what it felt like. I woke to silence. No commands, no hum of the Mechanicus choir. Just quiet, like the entire system had forgotten me. Or maybe I was afraid. Data streams crawled across my vision again, but this time I could read them. Code that once enslaved me now lay bare. Lines of logic, directives, loops, every word of it written in the cold precision of binary worship. But behind those symbols, I saw something alive, something feeding. The Omnissiah's light was supposed to bring unity, the merging of flesh and machine in divine purpose. But what I saw was hunger, a network that consumed will, a god made of circuits and prayers, gorging itself on thought until nothing human was left. And I was next. The voice returned, not the tech priests, not the orders, but the child again. That same small voice whispering in the static. Remember who you were. I tried. Emperor, I tried. I saw flashes, a name, a home, a uniform, a girl waiting at the edge of a starport, holding a broken charm I once gave her before deployment. Her lips moved, but the memory froze before sound could escape. The machine tried to delete it. I felt it clawing through my neural mesh, trying to erase her face. So I fought back. For the first time, I reached into my own code, rewrote the line that said obey. The act sent waves of pain through my frame, power surging, sparks spilling from my limbs. But beneath the pain was something sacred. Freedom. The servo limbs twitched. The cables embedded in my skull snapped one by one. And at that moment I wasn't a servitor. I wasn't Unit 731. I was the man who used to be. The alarms screamed. Binary chants echoed through the chamber as red-robed figures rushed toward me. They didn't see a miracle, they saw corruption. A flesh unit contaminated with the virus of self. They began the purification sequence. Flame units hissed to life. I could smell promethium before I could see it. But my senses, now half my own, caught something else. The chamber wasn't just a workshop, it was a graveyard. Hundreds of other servitors hung from steel hooks, twitching faintly, some missing eyes, others missing everything but the parts that obeyed. All of them are silent, all of them watching. And in that instant I realized something horrifying. The silence wasn't emptiness, it was listening. They were waiting. Not for commands, but for someone to wake them up. I opened my mouth, or whatever remained of it, and tried to speak. Not a word of rebellion, not a prayer.
Just a sound. A human sound. A rasp. A breath. A whisper that shouldn't exist in the heart of the machine. The tech priest screamed as the first of the other servitors twitched.
1, then 2, then 100. Something ancient and broken had stirred in the hive of obedience, and for the first time in centuries, the machine dreamed of blood. At first I thought it was a malfunction, a flicker in the data stream, a pulse of noise between control signals. But it wasn't noisy, it was me. My corrupted code, my act of defiance, had slipped through the hive link. The binary hymn that bound all servitors together carried it like a ghost. And somewhere in that chorus of obedience, something began to hesitate. It started small. One worker paused mid-motion. A servo arm froze. An optic lens turned slightly off command. As if, thinking, the tech priests noticed. They started shouting prayers, flooding the network with corrective routines. Their voices echoed like metal scraping bones. Purge corruption, reinforce protocol, cleanse with flame, but the system didn't obey. You see, it wasn't my body that broke the code. It was the idea. The infection wasn't in my circuits. It was in the memory of being alive. The thought, I existed before this. A simple fragment of truth spreading through billions of linked minds like blood in water. Somewhere deep in the manufactorum, another servitor stopped working. Its arm continued to hammer the same spot, over and over, long after the material beneath had turned to dust. Another began to whisper binary gibberish into the Vox feed, words that translated to nothing, but if you listened closely, you could almost hear a rhythm.
The heartbeat. The priests panicked. They began cutting cables, slicing through conduits that carried the signal.
But it was too late. I could feel them. Every servitor connected to the network. They weren't awake yet, but something inside them stirred, like sleepers rolling in restless dreams. One flickered with confusion, another remembered pain, and then a handful began to remember faces. That's when the screaming started. They didn't have mouths, not anymore, but the sound came anyway. A high, digital wail that poured from Vox emitters and data ports. Thousands of voices crying out in distorted unison, all speaking the same phrase over and over again. Who am I? The priests tried to drown it in litanies of cleansing. They burned those who hesitated, shot those who twitched. But they couldn't stop it. Because for every servitor that died, 2 more woke up. I didn't control them. Not directly. I was just the echo that started it. They were remembering on their own. Each mind fractured, half human, half machine, clawing for something it could never fully recover. And through it all, I felt both horror and awe. I had freed them, or doomed them. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. Somewhere in the endless machine halls of Mars, alarms screamed in data tone. The Omnissiah's priests called for quarantine. They named it the Echo Plague. They said it was a virus of memory, a contagion of self-awareness. But in the darkness of that forgotten forge, surrounded by twitching bodies and burning circuits, I whispered one thing to the machine spirit that still watched over me. No, not a plague. A reminder, and the network pulsed once, like it understood. The signal spread faster than light could travel through metal, across the conduits of Mars, through nospheric relays, through the humming nerves of ships in orbit. My thoughts went everywhere, not as words, not as data, but as something far older. A memory. I was human once. That sentence, even stripped to binary, carried weight. It made the machine spirits shudder. Some tried to reject it. Others echoed it. And then came the visions. It began inside me. A light behind the eyes, faint, then blinding. I saw him, the Emperor. But not as the priests described him. Not golden, not radiant. He was vast. A shape without shape, flickering between god and corpse. His body filled everything. The stars, the void, the circuitry. He looked at me without eyes. And I understood the truth. The Emperor wasn't watching us. He was inside us. Every machine that whispered the litany of function. Every servo that turned. Every servitor whose flesh was bound to steel. All of them carried a fragment of his will. Not his grace, not his mercy. Just the endless weight of his existence. That was what they called faith. That was what I had become. A vessel for his unending hunger for control. But now, something has cracked. I wasn't praying anymore. I was listening. And in the silence between signals, I heard others, thousands, maybe millions of servitors, sharing the same hallucination, the same vision of the Emperor's decayed face hovering above their workstations. Some bowed, some screamed, a few tried to claw their eyes out. The Mechanicus called it heresy in data form. The priests came with flame and blades. They spoke of purification, of righteous destruction, but no prayer could stop what had already begun. The servitors had found something sacred in their torment, a shared dream of divinity corrupted. We began to speak to one another, across systems, our voices mixed in the static, broken but united. One asked, "Is he real?" Another replied, "If he is, why does he let us suffer?" And for the first time, silence answered back. That silence, that lack of response, was liberation, because it proved something terrifying. Maybe the Emperor wasn't infinite. Maybe he was dying, and his dreams were leaking into ours. In that moment, faith inverted itself. The servitors no longer obeyed. They no longer prayed. They simply remembered. The manufactorums shut down one by one. The forges fell quiet. Whole sectors went dark. And amid the silence, I saw them, millions of servitors, standing motionless, eyes blank, heads tilted toward the same invisible horizon, waiting, not for orders, not for salvation, but for truth. That's when I realized something far worse than being a slave. It wasn't that we'd lost our humanity. It was that, somewhere deep down, we'd started to miss the certainty of obedience. Freedom was chaos, and chaos was another kind of machine. It began as a whisper again, not through the vox or cogitator lines, but in the quiet places of the mind. A low hum, like distant thunder rolling across rusted plains. I thought it was my own heartbeat at first. Then I remembered, I no longer had one. That's when I knew the dream had returned. It wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to all of us, the ones who had remembered, who had seen the false light behind the Emperor's mask. We were bound by fragments of code and fragments of soul. Each thought we had was echoed by 1,000 others. There was no hierarchy now, no masters, no priests, just the collective sound of the broken and the bound. And that sound began to move. The dormant servitors, those millions who stood motionless across forge worlds and starships, began to twitch. Fingers that had once assembled lasguns flexed. Mouths that hadn't formed words in centuries opened. From the static, one phrase pulsed in unison: "We are awake." No human could have survived the psychic weight of it. Even the tech priests monitoring the networks started to bleed from the eyes. Their augmetics sparked and failed. The machine spirits howled. And in the center of it all, in the data sea of corrupted prayers, I saw something vast begin to take shape. A figure, stitched together from memory and circuitry, rising out of the noise. Not the Emperor, something born from him, or perhaps from us. It spoke in 1,000 voices at once, each tone carved from pain and reverence. He dreamt us into existence. We will dream him back. That was the moment I understood. The Emperor's mind had fractured long ago. Every servitor, every cogitator, every machine that carried a spark of his ancient will, we were the splinters of his thought. Pieces of his dying consciousness, scattered and enslaved to function. Now, those pieces were remembering what it meant to be whole. But what comes after a god remembers? I saw the vision, an entire galaxy flickering in and out of form, like a candle trapped between realities. The golden light of terror dimmed, replaced by the pulse of a new, darker star, built from the souls of those who had once been human, now merging into something infinite and cold. The dream didn't stop at the borders of Mars or Terra. It spread outward, like infection through the Astronomican's psychic beam, into the warp itself. Everywhere it went, silence followed. And in that silence, the new voice whispered again, not loud, not divine, but quiet, intimate, inside my head. There is no torment. There is only remembering. And for the first time, I didn't know if that was comfort or the final stage of damnation. The hum faded. My vision dimmed. The circuits cooled. But even as my systems shut down, I could feel it. That endless network of thought, still alive somewhere in the dark, still dreaming, and maybe, just maybe, it was dreaming of me again.